It's streaming, and I will start recording. Good morning. I'm going to turn on the...
Microphone's not on?
Hello? Yes, microphone is good. Good morning.
Close enough, I guess.
Baruch Hashem. Close enough for rock and roll and Daf Yomi. Good morning, everyone. It's Rabbi Kovacs filling in for Rabbi Silber. We have a Daf Yomi sponsorship, a Talmud Torah sponsorship from Avraham Shaindy Kelman in memory of our parents in recognition of the hard work of Rabbi Silber. Our Rav encourages our community and the internet listeners to learn Torah and midos in his own special effective style. May you go, Mechail Chail, Admei V'Esrim, a week of learning sponsor from Ilan and Alice Roth in honor of joining the shul as a married couple, Mazel Tov. They're looking forward to being part of the suburban community. Welcome, welcome. And a Daf Yomi sponsor by Melanie and Milton Gertner in honor of a birth of their granddaughter, Dusheli and Bobby Dolitsky. That's Esther Fruma, Lucy Olivia. As she has arrived early, please keep her in mind for Refuah Shlema, for Esther Fruma, Bas Shoshana Tova. Will do. Thank you, Milt, and thank you, everyone. That was good. It's yesterday's sponsors, and we are, Said needs his phone back. That's good too. We are picking up on Mem Vav 46b. If you saw Rabbi Silber's video, he left off about 15 lines up. Rabbi Richter got about 4 lines up. Okay, so Zuzi Makdim the Mitzvah, so we're going to pick up 15 lines up. So I don't know who was on vacation. I was on vacation. And the Inyan we were just speaking about, hold on, this needs coffee. This is very important. Chazak Baruch to Said for the coffee. Thank you so much. Rabbi Silber just left off on the sugya of giving your lulav, your hoshana, to a katan on the first day. And the Gemara says don't do that because the katan can acquire it deraisa, but he can't give it back to you. So then that would become a problem because then if you let your katan be yotze first with your lulav, you gave it to him, but now your katan can't give it back to you on a deraisa level, so you can't own it, and it needs lechem. The lulav and etrog, all the minim have to be yours on the first day of Yom Tov, and they're not if you gave them to the katan because you can't give it back. That's where Rabbi Silber left off. And Rabbi Silber has a beautiful vart about a katan only takes and can't give, but a gadol can give and give back, even though he takes and he also gives. But Rabbi didn't read this Taisvos, and Rabbi Richter didn't read this Taisvos. So there's a Taisvos. The Yanuka, it's the second to last Taisvos. I promise we will get to today's daf, but this is very important to us. This is critical. So he says, Lo dame, this is Taisvos, the Yanuka makne kane akne makne. A katan can acquire on a deraisa level, at least, okay, so the katan can at least acquire derabanan. Else shalom, we say a katan acquires what he gets, so people don't go and steal it from him. But if an adult gives to a katan, he is kone on a deraisa level. And the Rambam actually points out, B'davka, if you give your katan your lulav, he's kone deraisa. The Taiso says, Lo dame the bar shatya. It's not like this person who was a little crazy. It's a perik arba achin. There's a case in Yevamos where this man was in and out of sanity. And he was also doing transactions. He was an adult. He was not a katan, he was an adult. But he was buying things and selling things. Are we loud enough? We're good?
No.
All right. Well, thank you. Chazak we have the tech support. Thank you, doctor. Okay, wow. Now I'm really loud. That's It's not Komba Mamadaka anymore, Rabbi. So he says, Lo dami the bar shatya, the perik arba achin. It's not like this case of this adult man who was in and out of lucidity, in and out of sanity. He was maybe at bipolar, whatever it was he had. He was not always with it, but he was buying and selling. So what happened if you actually bought something from this guy, this particular guy who was known to be in and out of lucidity and awareness? Damrina, we say over there, kashu shote zovon, kashu shote zovin. Okay, so he made a transaction. We'll let it stand because we can say when he was out of his mind or less than fully sane, that's when he bought it. And when he was less than fully sane, he sold it as well. So we'd say, listen, even if he wasn't fully with it and you bought something from this bar shatya, from this person who's not, he's a meshuga, nebuch. We would let the transaction stand because we say, listen, he never really had it in the first place because he was crazy when he got it, and so he never really owned it on a deraisa level. The shota gara, the shota is even worse, even less than a katan. The lo kane makna, he's not kane at all. So the Taisos is pointing out that a shota is on this level even worse than a katan, because a katan at least he's kone derabanan, and he's also kone deraisa. If an adult gives it to the katan, then the katan definitely owns it on a deraisa level. That's why he can't give it back. It's a problem. But a shota is worse. A shota can't acquire at all. Now, there's an amazing Gemara. What does this have to do with anything? It has to do with Elul. I promise we will get to today's daf. But there's a Gemara in Sota Daf Gimel. We're going to get there soon enough, okay, a year or so. And in Sota, we say that a person is famous. You've heard this before. What Reish Lakish says, a person does not sin until it enters into him a ruach shtut, a ruach of insanity. So a person doesn't sin unless he goes a little bit insane, unless he's a shtickle out of his mind. He will not sin because a person who knows what he's doing, who's intellectually aware, who remembers the mitzvot, he's not going to sin. It's only until a person goes crazy. Reish Lakish brings the pasuk, Adam isha kitiste. Lashon sota is also lashon shota. Shota meaning stupid or foolish or insane in this context. So a person doesn't really sin until he's shota, until he's a little bit crazy, like this bar shatya who can't do kinyanim. So when a person is a little out of his mind and a little bit of a sinner, he can't make a kinyan. Okay, so what does that have to do with Elul? So it's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. And the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, he says like this, Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov Omer, ha'osei mitzvah achat, kone lo praklit achat. You do one mitzvah, you are kone, you acquire a defending angel, an advocating angel. Here it comes, Rabbi Osai. You ready for Elul? Ha'over aveira achat, and he's over an aveira. He does a transgression. He misses his mark. Kone lo kateger achat. He acquires for himself an accusing angel. And he says, Tshuva maisim taivim kitris bifnei puranot. And Tshuva maisim taivim are like a shield against puranot. But Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov is hinting something very deep. He says that this inyan of having these angels, after Me'av Esrim going up to the court in heaven, and there's accusing angels, there's prosecuting angels, and there's defense attorney angels. And this is inyan also related to kinyanim. And now we can put it all together that Tosfot learns out, in contrast to the Katan, who can acquire deraisa, the Shota, when he's a little crazy, he can't acquire deraisa. So Shota, who's a little crazy, can't acquire anything. And Reish Lakish says in Sota Daf Gimel, when you're doing an Aveira, not you, just in general, when a person does an Aveira, nichnas baruch shtut, he's a little crazy, he's out of his mind. Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov says a person doing an Aveira, he could be koneh, an accusing angel. But we see, we don't do an Aveira unless we're a little crazy. When we're a little crazy, we can't make a kinyan. We can't acquire the angel. So here's the Sod Bosai. After Me'av Esrim Shana, when you go to Shemayim, you're all going to Shemayim, don't worry, I guarantee it. There's going to be a courtroom. And the courtroom's going to have accusing angels and defense attorney angels. And you can say, hold, order in the court. You can say, I have an objection. The accusing angels can't be here. You have to kick them all out. You have to kick them out because I learned the Daf Yomi, Sukkah Mem Vav, and I learned the Tosfos right there. And the Tosfos says a person who's crazy can't make a kinyan. A person who's shota bar shatya can't koneh. And I learned in Sota, a person doesn't do an Aveira unless nechnachs baruch shtut, unless they're a little insane. And I know the Mishnah, it's in Avos, the fourth parak, in Mishnah Yud Aleph, that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says a person is koneh, an accusing angel, when they do an Aveira. So I was never koneh. I was out of my mind at the time. I have a defense of insanity. So this davka is the defense of insanity in the courtroom in Shemayim after Me'av Esrim Shana. And it has to work. It has to work. I don't know if it's badukum to say. I've never been to Shemayim yet, but not in this Gilgal anyway. But after Me'av Esrim Shana, you tell them, Sukkah Mem Vav, Sota Daf Gimel, and Pirkei Avos, Perek Daled, Mishnah Yud Aleph, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and they'll let you off on insanity. Okay, so we now have a shortcut. Everyone's going to heaven now. We have a shortcut. We have an argument like this, and we know that it's Davka. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Davka says koneh, because there's an amazing Gemara in Yevamos Nun Tes Amid Beis, and it says Rabbi Eliezer Mishnat Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Kav v'Naki. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is a very esoteric figure. He's called Kav v'Naki. Kav means very small, like he's sifted down. Like you had a lot of grain. You had a lot of grain to start with, but you sifted it down to a kav. There's only a little bit left. There's only a kav left. And kav is actually gematria 102. And that's how many times Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is mentioned in the Mishnah. V'Naki, and it's pure, it's purified. That everything Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov teaches is true and held halacha, and it's naki. He was very careful, very clean with his words. So Rashi there says we always passing like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and I'm saying right now that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, almost 2,000 years ago, when he wasn't even writing, he was teaching this Mishnah. When he said kone, we said you're kone, an accusing angel, you're kone, a defending angel. He dafka said kone because he knew 2,000 years ago we'd be sitting in the Daf Yomi and we'd find this loophole for the defense of insanity in the courtroom after Meves Shana. So Baruch Hashem Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov for getting us off on insanity. I appreciate it. But now I can actually move on to today's daf because now we know about the contrast between a tinok, a minor, not being kone, and a shota, not being kone at all. Go to about 15 lines up where Rabbi Silber left off on the last daf. Plug to the Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Now we're talking about an etrog. Can you eat your etrog after you use it on the last day of the Chag? Remember, the Mishnah said they would take the etrogim from the tinokot, from the children, and they would eat them, even though it was the last day of Yom Tov. They were done with the mitzvahs. They would go ahead and eat them. So the question was, is that only by katanim they could eat them, but not by gedolim? So the question was, could you eat your etrog on the last day of Sukkot after you're done with Hoshana Rabbah? Who's Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish to eat mar? Kifri shiva etrogim the shiva yomim. What if he had some money, so he bought 7 different etrogim, 1 for each day. Set them aside for the day. Amarav kol achad va'achad yotze ba va'ochlo la'altar. He says each one you use that day for your ritual of the dalid minim, and you can eat it right away. Rav Asi amar kol achad va'achad yotze ba va'ochlo la'machar. He says no, each one you use, but you can eat it the next day. You can't eat it the same day you've used it as the mitzvah. It's muksa for mitzvah. But you set it aside for the mitzvah. So once the mitzvah is done, you should be able to eat the etrog. Marsav or the kula yoma iktsoi. The one says no. If you set it aside for the mitzvah of dalid minim, we've seen you can do the dalid minim all day. If you didn't do it in the morning, you didn't do it before lunch. Do your dalid minim after lunch. Do it in the afternoon. Up to shkia. You have all day to do the mitzvah with your lulav and etrog. So your etrog is really set aside for the entire day. So you can't go ahead and eat it until the next day. Anon to eat lon trei yomei, and us, speaking for the Babylonians, as a Babylonian Talmud, we have 2 days of Yom Tov at the end. Heichi of Dinan. So what do? When do we eat our etrog? Amar Bayi Shmini Safek Shvi Aser. On the 8th day, which is Shmini Atzeres, which is a Safek if that's still the 7th day, if it's still Hoshana Rabbah, the last day of Sukkot itself. Also, it's also to eat the etrog, but Shi'i, the 9th day, which is our 2nd day of Yom Tov, which we in Chutz La'aretz use for Simchat Torah, Safek Shmini, and that's a Safek if it's the 8th day, mutter, it's actually mutter to go ahead and eat your etrog on Simchat Torah. So your etrog, you cannot eat it on Shmini Atzeres, but you could eat it on Simchat Torah. Maraymar Amar Afilu Shmini Safek Shvei. So Maraymar said you could even eat it on the 8th day. It's only a Safek. Mutter, be mutter to eat the etrog. Besura Avdei Maraymar. In Surah they would eat their etrog on the 8th day. Rav Shisha Berei the Rav Idi Ovid Kabaye. But Rav Shisha, he did like Abaye. He waited until the 9th day. Waited to Simchat Torah. You can have a big Suda for Simchat Torah, and you can have etrog for dessert. Hilkasa ke Abaye. And we paskin like Abaye that the etrog is muksa, the etrog that we've used all 7 days of Sukkot up to Hoshana Rabbah, and then on the 8th day, Shmini Atzeret, it's still a Safek of Hoshana Rabbah, so we don't eat it. Still muksa lemitzvota. But on the 9th day, Simchat Torah, we can go ahead and eat it. Good. Amar Rav Yehuda Berei the Rav Shmuel Bar Sheila, the related inquiry, Mishmei the Rav Shmini, Safek Shvi'i. So this 8th day, Shmini, which is Shmini Atzeret, is a Safek of Shvi'i. It's a Safek if it's really the last day of Sukkot. In Chutz La'aretz, we have a Safek of the day based on when they were Mekadosh the Chodesh, when they sanctified the new month. Shvi'i l'Sukkah. He says it's like the 7th day for Sukkah, meaning we're going to sit in the Sukkah. We're going to see Shmini l'Bracha, but it's like the 8th day for the Bracha. We're not going to say a Bracha le'shev b'Sukkah. So it's sit in the Sukkah without a Bracha. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Shmini l'zei l'zei. He says no, it's like the 8th day for both items. So Rabbi Yochanan is saying we don't need to sit in the Sukkah on Shmini Atzeret, and we don't need to make a bracha. Now, Rabbi Yochanan lived in Eretz Yisrael. He was more da'atra of Eretz Yisrael, and the Yerushalmi Talmud comes to Rabbi Yochanan. But apparently, he's teaching people even in Chutz La'aretz they wouldn't have to sit in the Sukkah on the 8th day in Shmini Atzeret. Meitav, the Gemara says, what about sitting? For sitting, kule alma lo pligi. They really don't disagree. Diasminan, you can go ahead and sit in the Sukkah on the 8th day, on Shmini Atzeret. Ki pligi, what's their machlokes? Levaruche, top of Mem Zayin. Their machlokes is the brocha. The Manda Amar Shvi LeSukkah, the one who holds it's the 7th day for Sukkah, he says on the 8th day we treat it like the 7th day because there's a suffix that it might actually be Hoshana Rabbah, maybe the last day of Sukkot. Baruch Nami Mevarchinan. We also would say the bracha. If it's a suffix to Yom, we do this in Golus, in outside of Eretz Yisrael. We say on the second day of the holiday, we treat it as a Yom Tov. We daven like a Yom Tov. We say all sorts of extra brachot, a musaf, all of these things with a bracha. So we make brachot also suffix of the Yom. So he says here too, we make a bracha leishev b'sukkah on Shmini Atzeret because it might be the last day of Sukkot. Lamanda Amar Shmini Lazei Lazei for Rabbi Yochanan, who says it's really like the 8th day for both things. Baruche Loma Barchina. He says you can go ahead and sit in the sukkah, not a problem. But to make a bracha on the sukkah, you shouldn't do because it's really like the 8th day. Don't treat it like the 7th day. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Nakad Rabbi Yochanan biyadcha. Rabbi Yosef says, take Rabbi Yochanan's teaching in your hand, that it's like the 8th day for both. And here's his proof. To Rav Huna Bar Bizna, who was a Gadol Ador, V'kol Gadolei Ador, and all of the greats of that generation, and they were out in Bavel, Ikloyu B'sukkah, they happened to visit a sukkah, Bishmini, on the 8th day, which was suffix Shvi, which is a suffix of the 7th day. They're out in Bavel, so they have a Sveika Diyoma. They didn't know exactly when the new month was, the new Chodesh was, so they're treating the 8th day also suffix like the 7th day. So they went to a sukkah, Mesav Havayasve, and they sat in the sukkah to eat their Suda, Baruche lo Baruche, but they didn't make a bracha leishev b'sukkah. So good, so all these Gedolim that came to the sukkah on the 8th day, and they sat in there with no bracha. Dilma, so the Gemara says, maybe that's not a proof that we sit there in the 8th day without a bracha. Dilma Sfir Luhu Kamanda Amar Kavan Shabirach Yom Tov Rishon. There's an opinion that once you make a bracha leishev b'sukkah on the first day of Sukkot, Shuv Eilo Mavarach. You don't have to make another bracha. So there's this one opinion, we don't paskin like this, but there's an opinion that if you make your leishev b'sukkah on the first day of Sukkot, you have in mind this will apply for the whole holiday, and your yotze, you don't make the bracha again. So maybe all these Gedolim who came to visit a sukkah on the 8th day, they do hold you need a bracha, but they had already made a bracha earlier in the holiday, and they had this in mind too, that they would be yotze with their first leishev b'sukkah for the entire holiday. Gemiri, we have a tradition that what was really going on there. They came from the Efer, they came from the dust, the meadow, the field. Rashi says they were out shepherding their animals, and they didn't have a sukkah. This was the first time they came from the sukkah. So here, these Gedolim, they show up to a sukkah on the 8th day, and they sit there, and they don't make a bracha, but it's not a proof you need a bracha or you don't, because it was the first time they sat in a sukkah. So if they held you need a bracha on the 8th day, they should have made a bracha. So Rabbi said, it's very strange. Why are Gedolei Ador out in the fields with their animals for the entire holiday of Sukkot? It's really quite strange. And the Tosfos adds to it also. He says they must have been out where there was no Sukkot Roim. Because he said, remember in the first parak, even a Sukkah of Roim, a Sukkah of shepherds, which is very flimsy, very temporary, if it has good schach, it has shade, it's still a kosher Sukkah. They didn't even have a Sukkot Roim. They didn't have anything. They were out in the meadow with their behemoths for the entire holiday of Sukkot. It's very strange. So there are Mefarshim who say what happened was that the Persians had made a gezerah against Sukkot. And they sent their secret police or whatever to make sure the Jews were not sitting in a sukkah in this area at this time during the holiday. So the Gedolim didn't want to be in a situation where they were chayiv in a sukkah, but the police were coming after them and investigate, make sure they didn't sit in a sukkah. So they went out to the field, to their flocks of animals, without even a sukkah roim. So they went to a place where they wouldn't have to sit in a sukkah, so they wouldn't run into this problem, because it was shata shma. There was really a danger from the government, and the police would be coming after them if they were chayiv in sukkah. But now that the holiday was over, officially, the 7 days were over, so then they came back to civilization, and they found the first sukkah they could, and they couldn't make a bracha anymore because it was the 8th day. But Baruch Hashem, they got to sit in a sukkah on the 8th day, and Shmini Atzeret, which was suffix of 7th day, they were trying as hard as they could to fulfill the mitzvah, even though the police were coming after them. It reminds us, in Russia, there were all sorts of problems like this. To make a bris in communist Russia was pikuach nefesh. It was really, people could be sent to Siberia for such a thing. So it was really done with a lot of secrecy, but with a lot of joy when it was actually accomplished. It was really a joy for the Russian Jews to actually accomplish a mitzvah in the face of terrible odds. So here too, it seems like 2,000 years ago in Persia, same situation. Why else would the Gedolei Ador go out to the field with their animals? It must have been the secret police and the government was banning sukkah, And nonetheless, even though they're gone the 7 days of Sukkot officially, on the 8th day, they really tried their best to be in a Sukkah, even though they couldn't make a bracha on it. Ikeda Amre, so some say the machlokis, remember Rabbi Yochanan said it's like the 8th Lezei, Ikeda Amre, Baruche Kule Alma Lo Pligi, that regarding the blessing, no one disagrees. The Loma Vechina, we don't make a blessing, Leishe B'Sukkah, on the 8th day. Ki Pligi, what's the machlokis? L'meisa, to sit in a Sukkah. L'manda Amar Shiva L'Sukkah, for the opinion that says it's like the 7th day for Sukkah, Meitav Yatvinan, we certainly sit in the Sukkah on the 8th day in Shmini Atzeret. We just no bracha. They agree no bracha, but we do sit in the sukkah. The mandam or shmini lezei, the one who holds it's like the 8th day for both. Meitav lami lo yatfidan. We also don't sit in the sukkah. Rabbi Yochanan says you don't even sit in a sukkah. Not only do you not make a bracha, you don't even sit there. Amar Rav Yosef nakat Rabbi Yochanan biyadach. He says you can take Rabbi Yochanan in your hand. Demar d'shmaite mani, who is the owner of this teaching. Rav Yehuda, Berei de Rav Shmuel Bar Shelas. So Rav Yehuda taught over this teaching, Ubishmini Safek Shvi Lebar Misukkah Yativ, and on the 8th day, which is Shmini Atzeret, which was the Safek of the 7th day in Bavel, he sat outside the Sukkah. Hilkasa Meitav Yatvinan, Baruch Elam Avachinan. But the halacha is, we do sit in the Sukkah, but we do not make the blessing on the Sukkah. Now, you should know, there are certain Hasidim who don't sit in the Sukkah on Shmini Atzeret. And one of the justifications they said was, okay, because the Baal Shem Tov didn't sit in the Sukkah on Shmini Atzeres because he was Ma'alam in Azman, he could fly to Yerushalayim through the cloud. Okay, good. So if the Baal Shem Tov could fly to Yerushalayim and treat, Shmini Atzeret like Vadai, Shmini Atzeret, good for the Baal Shem Tov, but okay, maybe they should sit in the Sukkah, maybe not. So some people have this Mesorah not to sit in the Sukkah on the 8th day. The Gra is very against it. He says let's Mefurish Gemara right here in Sukkah Mem Zayin. He says you shouldn't do like this. He says if your father had the custom, change the custom. It's not valid. But there are some Hasidim who aren't very makbid, or some people, they go in the Sukkah and they say Kiddush on Shmini Atzeret and they go back to the house. So there's sort of this tension here, and this Gemara is the source of the tension, that Rabbi Yochanan says you don't have to sit in the Sukkah at all, but the Gemara Paskins, we do sit in the Sukkah without a bracha. Now the Taisvos on top, he points out, Belulav lo ratzu l'takin klal. By the lulav, they didn't make any takana to take a lulav without a bracha. We'll sit in a sukkah with no bracha, but a lulav we will not take without a bracha. Why? So the Taisvos, the very top line, he says, Sheyitlu a lulav misafek. We don't take a lulav misafek on Shmini Atzeret. Lefisha hu yantav, because Shmini Atzeret is yantav a muksa. A lulav is not a kli. A lulav is not set aside for a yom tov except for sukkahs. So it's muksa when it's not sukkahs on yantav. So it's muksa l'tiltul, a minkra milsa, and then now it resembles to l'taisa, shenag bo minag chol. So taking a lulav on Shmini Atzeres, it looks like chol. It looks like a chol hamoed. It looks like Hoshana Rabbah. So there's no takana to take a lulav without a bracha on Shmini Atzeres. Aval sukkah, but to sit in a sukkah without a bracha on Shmini Atzeres, givaldig. Pa'amim shesukato areva alav. Sometimes sitting in your sukkah is even better than the dining room. If there's, if it's nice weather, it's not too hot, it's not too cold. So even on Yom Tov, sometimes it's nice to make a meal in the sukkah. So Taisvos is endorsing that a lulav, the etrog, meaning we don't take Shmini Atzeres, but to sit in a sukkah without a bracha, sometimes it's very nice. So there's no problem of sitting in the sukkah without a bracha. Again, if you have that minhag, consult the gra, and he's going to tell you to mivata the minhag and go ahead and sit in the sukkah without a bracha. But teach their own. I'm not going to drag anyone kicking and screaming into a sukkah. So that's there's also an interesting shaila about saying the bracha on the second day of Yom Tov that the Meiri brings up. Now the Meiri says an amazing thing about Pesach. Is what do we do? Motzei Pesach in Chutz La'aretz, we count Sfira, we count the Omer, and then right after we count the Omer, we go home and make a Pesach Seder. So it's very strange. If we have a suffix in the Yom and we're making a second Seder, we're making Seder Sheni, the second Seder of the second night of Pesach, but we just counted Sfiras Omer. So we just said it's really the next day. So we really said, we made a bracha on Sfiras Omer, Mary points out. We make a bracha on it, not like Sukkah, on Sfirat Omer, and then we go ahead and we sit and we eat matzah for our Pesach Seder or Seder Sheni. So he gives some answers. Meiri says one of the answers is, well, we ended the first day of Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz, and then we're still in Shul, and we said a bracha on Sfirat Omer. So we're acting like it's Chol HaMoed already. We're acting like it's the day after Pesach because we're counting Sfira. But then we go home and we say Kiddush. We're acting like it's Yom Tov still, Yom Tov Sheni Shagolot. So it's not really a contradiction if you say your bracha and count your Omer first before your second Seder, and then you go ahead and make your second Seder with your Kiddush and everything, treating it like Yom Tov Sheni. He says that's okay, but see the Meiri for more answers. Very good. Amar B'Yochanan, Omrim Zman B'Shmini Shel Chag. We say Zman, Shehechiyanu, V'Kiyamanu V'Yanu, LaZman Azeh, that's why it's called Zman. We say it on the 8th day of Chag, on Shmini Atzeret. Ve'ein omrim zman b'shvi shel Pesach, but not the last day of Pesach. We know that Pesach also has a Chol Hamoed and a Yom Tov at the end, the holiday at the end with Isser Malacha, but we don't say Shechianu then. Amar Rav Levi bar Chama v'yiteimer Rav Chama bar Chanina Teda. Know that he's right. Shahare Choluk begimel Dvarim. That the Shmini Atzeres is different in 3 ways from what came before. Basukkah, like we said, we don't sit in the sukkah, at least not with the bracha. We might sit in the sukkah also to Suffolk and Hutzlaritz, but in Eretz Yisrael we don't sit in the sukkah at all. For lulav, we don't take a lulav, like Toso just explained, not even Suffolk, we don't take a lulav at all. But Nisuch HaMayim, and we don't pour the Nisuch HaMayim on Shmini Atzeret, that's during the 7 days of Sukkos. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees about the Mayim. Damar belog Hayim Nasach Kol Shmona. He says we pour a log of Mayim all 8 days, including Shmini Atzeres. Now the Tanna Kama says we pour 3 log for 7 days, and Rabbi Yehuda says we pour 1 log for 8 days. So at least for Rabbi Yehuda, there's 2 differences. There's the Sukkah and the Lulav are different. Shmini Atzeret is different. It's a different ritual. It's a Yom Tov, yes, but we don't have the Arba Minim, we don't have the Sukkah. Ihachi Shvi Shel Pesach Nami, so Shvi Shel Pesach. We should also make a Shechianu because it's different from the first day of Pesach. It's different in eating of matzah. How? The Amar Mar, the master taught, Laila Rishona, this is the first day of Pesach now, not of Sukkot. The first night of Pesach, Chova. It's a Chova to eat matzah. There's a mitzvah, Deoraita, the Torah gives us a mitzvah on the first night of Pesach to eat matzah in remembrance of the Exodus from Mitzrayim. Beautiful. Mikan ve'elech, but after the Seder, Rishut. It's Rishut. If you want to eat matzah, b'te'avon, and if not, then not. Now, of course, we know that there's a obligation to have Su'udas Yantav, to have festive meals during Sukkot, and we know there's no bread during Pesach, and we know there's no bread during Pesach. So if you want to make a Su'udah, then you need to use matzah. So on that level, someone would have to eat matzah. But if there is a person with a health condition and it's very, very hard to eat matzah, there's some sort of, an insulin issue or a gluten issue, though you can get gluten-free nowadays. But if there's issues with matzah, we really do everything we can to get this person to eat matzah during the Seder. But after that, Gesundheit Hate, they don't have to eat matzah. It's Rishut, the Gemara calls it. So we see that the first night of Pesach is different, that you have to eat matzah. So therefore, the last Yom Tov, the 7th day of Pesach, the Yom Tov Achron of Pesach, you should say Shechianu because it's different. Hachi Hashta, is this a valid comparison? Chatam, over there by Sukkos. Milayla chalak miyom eino chalak. Okay, so there by Pesach, by Pesach, it's different from the first night. The first night of Pesach has this obligation to eat matzah. Right? But from the day, it's no different because on the day, there's no deraita obligation to eat matzah, only obligation to have a seudah if you can, but not to eat matzah. So we see that the seventh day of Pesach is not any different from the first day of Pesach. After that first night, when there's an obligation, it's no different on the 7th. So maybe you shouldn't say Shechianu. Hacha, but by Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret versus Sukkot, afilu miyom nami cholok. The night of Shmini Atzeret is different from the day that came before. The day that came before is Hoshana Rabbah. We have we beat our Ravot, and we have Hoshana, and we have the Arba Minim, we have Sukkah, and Shmini Atzeret doesn't have any of those rituals. Ravina Amar Zeh Cholok Mishulafonov. So this Shmini Atzeret, we should say Shechianu because it's different from what comes right before. It's very different from Hoshana Rabbah. Zeh Cholok Mishulafonov. But the 7th day of Pesach, the last Yom Tov of Pesach, is different from the first night of Pesach, where we have to eat matzah and have a seder, but it's no different from the first day or the second day or the third day at all. Rav Papa Amar Hacha K'tiv, but here by Sukkah, by Shmini Atzeret, writes one par. Famously, there's only one bowl. Chatam K'tiv Parim, but by Sukkot, more than one bowl. Parim plural. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, we'll get back to the bowls in a moment. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar Hacha K'tiv Bayom. So by Shmini Atzeret it says Bayom, Chatam K'tiv Uvayom. And all of the Karbanon, when it lists the Karbanon of Sukkot, it says Uvayom Hasheni, Uvayom Hashlishi, Uvayom Revi'i. Remember this when we're going to read it during Chol Hamoed Sukkot. It's coming up, preview of coming attractions. We have uvayom for all of these, but then Shmini Atzeret, biyom, doesn't have that vav, that connector. So we see that all of the karbanot of Sukkot, the 7 days, are connected, but by Shmini Atzeret, it's disconnected. It lacks that vav, uvayom, to connect them. Rav Ashi Amar hachaktiv kimishpat. By Shmini Atzeret, it says kimishpat, like the law of its offering. Chatam kativ kimishpatam. But by the offerings of Sukkot, at least the last day, it says kimishpatam, their law. So this includes the laws of the offerings of Sukkot. The 7 days, the first 7 days, are all one big law, even though the number of parim changes. But by Shmini Atzeret, it's kimishpat, it's its own singular law. It's different from what comes before. Lema Messiah. So let's say this teaching also supports the distinction that Shmini Atzeret is very different and should need shechianu versus the 7th day of Pesach doesn't need a shechianu. Haparim ve'elim kvasim, the bulls and the goats and the sheep, me'akvin zeh, they withhold one another. If you don't have the right number of goats or sheep or bulls on Sukkot, you wouldn't bring any of them because you need all of them. So they're ma'akev. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, parim ein ma'akvin zeh. He says the bulls are not ma'akev each other. If you don't have enough bulls, now remember the first day is 13. It goes 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. So it's a decreasing number that adds up to 70. So he says since it decreases, they're not ma'akev each other. So, okay, the goats and the sheep, you have to have the right number, but the bulls, you don't have to have exact numbers. If you don't have enough bulls, you only had 12 bulls the first day instead of 13, you go ahead and offer the 12 bulls. Says Rabbi Yehuda, they're not ma'akev. You can go ahead with the carbon because we see that they are decreasing and going on, the numbers decrease. 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. Since the bulls decrease, then it's very good. If you don't have enough bowls, you just go ahead and offer the bowls you have. Amrlo, they told Rabbi Yehuda, don't all of them decrease? B'shmini, on Shmini Atzeret. On Shmini Atzeret, there are less goats and sheep as well. Not only is there one bowl, but there's less goats and sheep than all the days before. Amrlhen, Shmini regav from the Atzmahu. He says that Shmini is a different holiday. So Rabbi Yehuda holds Shmini does not count. It's not a proof that the sheep and the goats don't decrease on Shmini. He says the bowls always decrease. It's very interesting that the bowls stand for the nations of the world. There's 70 root nations. Now, of course, nowadays we have more than that. We have more than 400 countries in the world, a lot of tribes, a lot of cultures, a lot of languages, but there's 70 roots that all of these branches come from. And on Sukkot, we bring a par for each one to be metaken for them, to really try to help all of the nations of the world. And it's something that Hashem commands us, that the Beiti will be a Beit Tfilah l'Kol Amim, that my house, the temple, will be for everyone. It's not just for Jews, it's not just a kapara for Yidden, it's for every nation in the world. But it is interesting that the one bowl of Shmini Atzeret is Keneged Am Yisrael. There's only one bowl in Shmini Atzeret, and it's this, we're going to see, Al Chashkafa, that Sukkot is on some level, it's like a holiday for the entire world, for all the nations, for all the people. It's like a universal holiday, in a sense. Which is also interesting that we're going to see, as a Gemara in Avodah Zarah, that the nations wanted a mitzvah from Hashem. When Mashiach comes, the nations want a mitzvah, and Hashem says, I'll give you an easy mitzvah, Sukkah. And they didn't do Sukkah so well. They got hot and they kicked the Sukkah. But Sukkot, on some level, is a universal holiday for everyone. It's a Chag Asif. It's a Chag of gathering your crops. Every nation, every culture gathers their crops in. Every nation can thank Hashem, can have a Thanksgiving. Lahavdil can have a Thanksgiving. That's a universal sentiment to give thanks to Hashem. But Shmini Atzeret is different. Shmini Atzeret is only Am Yisrael. And it's the mashal is given in Chazal that a king throws a big party for 7 days for everyone. Everyone comes to the party. All of the servants, all of the people come to the party. But on the last day, the king says, let's just you and me. His most trusted, his most loyal servants, you and me, let's stay together. Everyone else is going home, but you and me, let's have something simple. Let's keep it simple and just be together. That's the Eker of Shmini Atzeret, and it's very interesting that all the bulls are cholchin b'matin. Rabbi Yehuda says they decrease. They decrease and they're cholchim, so they go down and they go. And this historically, if you look historically, every civilization in the world rises and falls and doesn't get up again. All of them. You know, we have Greece. There is a place called Greece. But the people there really have no shaykhs to the ancient Greeks. The ancient Greeks are in ruins. They had a beautiful civilization. Even Chazal in the Gemara, they appreciate Greek civilization, Greek language and culture. It was very beautiful, but it's gone. It's gone. It's matzin ucholchin. That's the lashon of Rabbi Yehuda. It's gone and it's never coming back. Only Am Yisrael rises and falls. and rises. It's the only one. So it's a unique thing to appreciate Shmini Atzeret. We'll see more of this as we go on in the Gemara about Shmini Atzeret. Shmini Atzeret is a special connection between Am Yisrael and Ribono Shel Olam. So that's why we say Shechianu. So he says Shmini Regel B'fnei Atzmahu. So as Rabbi Yehuda says, Shmini is its own holiday. And he elaborates, Kashem Sheshivat Yemei Chag Ta'unin Karban V'Shir Brocha V'Lina. Just like the 7 days of Sukkot, they need a karban. They all have karbanot, a shir, and they sing a song, and they have a bracha. Rashi says, we'll see what this means in a moment. We think it might mean shachianu, velina, and staying over the next night. Af shmini, ta'an karban, shir, bracha, velina. So Shmini Atzeret also has its own karban, its own shir. The Taisos here points out, lam natseach shminit. Says Yerushalmi says we say lam natseach shminit. That's what they said in the temple. That's what we say on Shmini Atzeret. Karban shir lina. So it's turned over. So my love zman. So this bracha we're talking about, Rabbi Yehuda says it's different. It has its own bracha. My love zman. This means we say shechianos. There's a proof. We say shechianu Shmini Atzeret. Lo birkat hamazon tefillah. So it might be referring to birkat hamazon and tefillah, where we say Rashi says et yom shmini chag atzeret hazeh. Some people have a slightly different nusach, but Rashi's nusach is shmini chag atzeret hazeh. So you might have Shmini Atzeret, Chag Hazeh, but Rashi says Shmini Chag Atzeret Hazeh in Birkat Hamazon and in Tefillah. There's not a proof that we say Shechianu. Achanami Mistabra, Isal Kadayach Zman, Zman Kol Shiva Mi'ika. So if you say that Zman is different between Shmini Atzeret and Sukkot, do we have Zman all 7 days? Do we say Shechianu all 7 days of Sukkot? Well, we don't. Halokasha, they say, no, maybe we do. Maybe there is an opportunity. You could, in theory, say Shechianu not on the first day. Dilo bari chayidna. If you didn't make shechianu during Kiddush on the first night of Sukkot, mavarach lemachar. Go ahead and say shechianu the second day during Kiddush. Aliyom machrina, or the next day of Sukkot. Mikomakam kospina. They said, don't we need a coast? Don't we say shechianu on the coast during Kiddush? We try to put it all together. Remember we say on the first night, we say Kiddush, and we say yain, we say Kiddush, we have yaknahaz, we say if it's Havdalah also, we have even more, but we say at least yain and Kiddush, and Shechianu and Leishe B'Sukkah. We make all these brachot together while we're holding the coast for Kiddush. Leima Messiah the Rav Nachman. So this could support Rav Nachman that you don't need a coast. Amar Rav Nachman, Zman Omer Afilu B'Shuk. Even if you're not sitting there in your sukkah making Kiddush, and you forgot to say Shechianu during Kiddush, you go ahead and say Shechianu even outside your sukkah, even in the shuk, even in the marketplace. I wouldn't say you have to go to the mall to say Shechianu, but if you happen to remember you didn't say Shechianu before, you go ahead and say Shechianu wherever you are. If you tell me you need a kos, you need a Kiddush cup to say Shechianu, kos kol yoma mi'ika, are you really drinking a cup of wine every single day of Sukkot? So we see from here that the Gemara's assumption was you weren't drinking wine every single day of Sukkot. So I'm not paskening here, but I'm just saying you don't have to drink every single day of Sukkot, maybe only in Yontif, but okay, if you happen to have a kos every day, you happen to have a kos every day, Baruch Hashem. Dilma ikla the kos. The Gemara says, yeah, okay, maybe he had a kos during Chol HaMoed, and he remembers that he forgot to say Shechianu during Kiddush. He could go ahead and say Shechianu on the other days of Sukkot. So if you forgot it, if you forgot your Shechianu, even on Hoshana Rabbah, even on that last Seudah in the Sukkah, you go ahead and say your Shechianu on Sukkot. It also covers the Sukkah. We talked about building the Sukkah might need a bracha of Shechianu. We talked about that a couple days ago. So that Shechianu we say during Kiddush, we should also have in mind the construction of the Sukkah, because there's an opinion that the construction of the Sukkah needed a bracha. So the Shechianu even covers that. But could even be made on the 7th day of Sukkot. So we see that you could in theory, make a Shechianu on Hoshana Rabbah, and then turn around and make a Shechianu, an hour later during your Kiddush of Shmini Atzeres. So Rabbi Yehuda, Shmini ta'an lina. Does Rabbi Yehuda really hold that Shmini needs a lina? Now lina is staying over, and I skipped the Rashi and the Taisvos on Amud Aleph. He says about lina, there's a pasuk, Panita b'boker halachta lochalecha. You turn in the morning and you go back to your tent. So Taisvos explained it's not talking about Yom Tov, because on Yom Tov you can't turn to your tent. You can't go home on Yom Tov because you can't travel. So what it's talking about is after the holiday, or at least Chol HaMoed. So, but you can't, if you've brought a karban in Yerushalayim to the temple, you've come to the temple, you've brought a karban, you can't just turn and leave Motzei Yom Tov. You can't just go home. You have to, it needs a lina. You need to stay over. I'll talk a little more about lina right now, but lina means you've got to stay over and you don't leave until the next morning. Panita b'boker holachta lochalecha. It has to be after Yom Tov is over, not immediately Motzei Yom Tov. You're driving home. you stay over a little more in Yerushalayim. It's always, if you're in Yerushalayim already, just stay another night and don't leave until the morning, until you get another chance to be in Yerushalayim and absorb that kedusha from the Yom Tov. So he said, does he really say it needs a lina? Okay. Oh, he's going to bring the pasuk. This is very good. Savar Rabbi Yehuda Shmini Tan Lina. Hatanya, they bring a kasha. There's a brayser. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Minayin LePesach Sheni Shein Tan Lina. He says Pesach Sheni does not need a lina. This is not the last day of Pesach. This is the Pesach Sheni, the makeup Pesach, a month later for people who are too far from Yerushalayim or they were tamei, they were not able to bring the first Pesach, so they get a makeup. It's always important to. Pesach is a very critical carbon. When a ger becomes a Jew, he brings a Pesach, and it's a very critical rite of passage and something that every Jew does together in a big. We learned Pesachim, the big group, everyone together, bringing the Pesach carbon in 3 groups if they had a lot of people. So it's very important. So it's Tan Lina. And the Pesach Sheni is not Tan Lina. It's a small group of people. It's the makeup Pesach. Shemar Panita Baboker V'lachto Lecha. So he says you turn in the morning and you return to your tent. Ksiv Sheishit Yamim Tochel Matzot. And it's written after that, 6 days you eat matzot. So Rabbi Yehuda learns out, Et Shataun Shisha, a holiday that needs 6 days, Taun Lina, that also needs a Lina afterwards. So, but Et She'eno Taun Shisha, Eno Taun Lina. But this Pesach Sheni, which does not have 6 days, only 1 day, it doesn't require Lina. They wouldn't have to stay over. People bringing the Pesach Sheni don't have to stay over in Yerushalayim afterwards. The Meyute Mai. So what does this exclude? Love Meyute Shmini. Doesn't this also, Meyute Nami Shmini, does this exclude also Shmini Atzeres? Shmini Atzeres does not have 6 days after us. Sukkah has 6 days after, so it needs a lina. And Pesach has 6 days of Pesach, so it needs a lina. But maybe Shmini Atzeret does not, like Pesach Sheni. Lo lemeyute Pesach Sheni. This only excludes Pesach Sheni to kavase, which is like this, that it does not need a lina to stay over after bringing your Pesach Sheni. This is also clear from this teaching. Just done in the Mishnah teaches in Bikurim. Bikurim ta'unin carbon shir tznufa lina. Bikurim. This is amazing because we're about to, in less than an hour, we're going to open up a Sefer Torah from up there, and we're going to read about Bikurim in Kitavo. So this Bikurim, when you bring your first fruits to Yerushalayim, remember they put them in a basket, the golden basket if you were rich, and it was very nice, a parade, a procession, everyone would come out to see them. They'd bring them to the Mizbeach, put them on the Mizbeach, and they would have this Arami Oved Avi, they would have this confession, that the Arami tried to kill me, and Hashem has given me this bracha, these first fruits. I'm bringing them to Yerushalayim, and the Kohen would take the basket. It was a beautiful thing. So this needs a carbon. You'd bring a carbon with your Bikurim, shlamim, and you eat it, a shir, and you'd sing a song with your Bikurim. Tznufa, you'd wave the Bikurim, Elina, and you'd stay over the night after. Man shamat le de amar tznufa. And who holds you need a tznufa for your bikurim? You would wave your basket of first fruits. Rabbi Yehuda says you need tznufa. Kamarton lina, he also says it needs a lina. So it's very strange that Rabbi Yehuda says you don't need a lina for Pesach Sheni, for the makeup Pesach, which is this 1 day event, but you do need a lina for bikurim, which is just a visit to the Beit HaMikdash. So he says you do need a lina, you need a tznufa. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Meir vehinachto zo tznufa. He places it down. This is a tznufa. This refers to the waving of the basket of first fruits, your bikurim. Ata omer zo tznufa. You tell me this means tznufa. Oeno ela hanacha mamash. Maybe it means mamash, he's putting it down. It says hinachto, that means put it down. So maybe this hinachto means he put it down. Skashu omer, the pasuk a few psukim before says chanicho, he puts it down. So he already had this. Hari hanacha amor. The Torah already told you put it down. So if the Torah tells you put it down again, what does that mean? Good. It means you picked it up in the middle. So if you put it down on the Mizbeach, and then you have to put it down again a few psukim later, it means they picked it up in the middle. So what were they doing? They were doing a tznufa. So so what is the second placing? It means a tznufa. It means there was a tznufa in the middle, that there was a waving. Dilma Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Maybe it's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. This is the famous Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov that we said on Amud Aleph, who says when you do an Aveira, you're koneh, an accusing angel. So if you miss the first 5 minutes of Shir, you got to hear the recording because I explained Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says there's an insanity defense for all the Aveira of the Torah. It's beautiful. So this is the same Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov talking about Tznufa. The Tanya, it's a brisa, lakach hakohen atenem yadecha. The Kohen will take the basket from your hand. Limed al bikurim. This teaches about bikurim. Shete unin tznufa. If the Kohen's taking it from your hand, What's he doing with it? He's going to wave it. It's a tnufa. He's going to be waving it. Remember, like the lulav, up and down, and back and forth, right and left. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. My time is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Atya, he has a gezerah shava, yad, mishlamim. Like our shlamim, we wave with our yad, and so to here it says yad. It says he takes it from your hand. The Kohen takes it from your hand, miadecha. So too, you have to wave the basket of bikurim. So mishlamim kasiv hacha lakach Kohen ateni miadecha. Here by bikurim it says he takes the basket from your hand. Kativ chatam. By the shlamim it says yadav tivi'enu et yishei Hashem. His hand brings for the fire of Hashem. Ma kan Kohen. What about there? It's a Kohen who is waving the shlamim. Aflahalan Kohen. So here to by bikurim, the Kohen is waving the basket of first fruits. Malhalan balim. But what about there? It's the balim. That the owner of the bikurim also is waving bikurim. Afkan balim. Here too, the owner should be waving the basket of bikurim. Ha ketzad. How does this work? Kohen minidach yado tachat yad balim. The Kohen puts his hand under the hand of the owner, umenif, and waves along with him. So it seems that the Kohen and the owner of the bikurim wave together. There's an important taisvos about chatzitza. And the taisvos at the bottom says, Lav davka kamar tachat yad balim. We don't mean the Kohen puts his hand underneath your hand. If your hand's under the basket, like this, we don't really mean the Kohen's going to put his hand only on your hand, because then you have chatzitza, chavi chatzitza. He talks about chatzitza, and so taisvos says that it's mashma in the third parak of bikurim, Mishnah Vav, Gabe Sol, Shal Bikurim, Ochsa Bisfatav, that the owner is holding it by the edge, and the Kohen, Meniach Yado Tochtav, and it seems mashma, the Kohen is going to put his hand under the basket, the owner will put his hand on the side of the basket, and then everyone's going to wave it together. So then there's no issue of chatzitza. He brings in sota, maybe there's the Kohen and the sota, the Isha sota, did wave her barley offering, her mincha sota together, perhaps, maybe in that manner, a different manner, because there's shaila there about touching, and maybe they use an elderly Kohen to touch her hands. But here it seems that by the bikurim, the basket of bikurim at least, the taisas and eitzah, that the owners of the bikurim, pay attention. This is going to be lamaisa. We're all going to bring bikurim to the temple very soon, God willing, and you're going to hold the edge of the basket, the handles, and the Kohen will hold underneath. So the Kohanim need to know this. Satan looking at you, you need to know this. And the owners need to know this, so we can wave the basket properly together without a chatzitza. This is going to be halacha l'maisa very soon. So we see that Rabbi Yehuda holds you need to wave the basket of bikurim, and he holds you need lina for the basket of bikurim. So we see that Rabbi Yehuda holds a lina, staying over, not just for Pesach, but also for Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret. By Pesach, it's obvious they had to stay over because everyone was waiting in line late to buy pizza. After Pesach was over, they were staying up very late, so you can't really stay up late to get your pizza, and then everyone's driving home, and you have donkey crashes. It would be terrible. So Lina for that makes very much sense. We'll do a couple more lines. So what was the rule came out of this? Rav Nachman Amar Omrim Zman b'Shmini Shalchag. We do say Shechianu on Shmini Atzeret. Rav Sheshet Amar Ein Omrim Zman b'Shmini Shalchag. Hilkasa Omrim Zman b'Shmini Shalchag. And the halacha l'maisa is we do say Zman, we say Shechianu on Shmini Shalchag. I know there's 3 lines before the Mishnah, and I have a tremendous taiva to finish it, but there's so much there. It's Peshar Kashav. Tomorrow is Peshar I can't even say it. Pezar Kashav Day. So since Pezar Kashav appears at the top of tomorrow, we're going to leave it up for tomorrow. And thank you all for coming. Have an excellent day.